Stelzel, and we're just wrapping up a road show where we've been talking about how to grow your business. So if you're a technology reseller, this video is for you. I've hit several cities over the past couple of months here, and of course behind me right here is downtown Denver, and we've wrapped up our last event last night. So the point here is not about the technology, although the technology is important, but it is how do we grow our business? And so what I'd like to do is share with you kind of a recap of some of the material that I shared with the group last night. The place where I see the biggest issue is people trying to grow their business. How do I get new logo business? So when I'm talking to a reseller, one of the questions I always ask is, how many new logo customers have you picked up in the last 12 months? It's a great question because your business may be profitable, but if it's not growing over time, it will shrink with attrition. And so the topic that I presented was how to attract 30 new prospects in just 60 minutes. So if you could get 30 prospects in 60 minutes, would you do it? And I think you would, right? It's hard to do. And so we're going to take a look now at some slides that I went through, and I'm just going to give you kind of a summary so you can take a look and see some of the material here on how to grow your business, and particularly if you're in the MSP business, you might have seen a lot of price pressure recently. How do we grow that? How do we expand that? How do we get people to stop talking about price and start looking at the offerings that we have? So I started out by talking about some of the guys that I've worked with over the past couple of months. And I love working with resellers who are trying to build their business, and they've taken the steps, they've put in the managed services, they've created their recurring revenue stream, and they've grown, right? And they've seen success. But over the last couple of years, we've seen quite a plateau there where things are not coming in as easily. There's price pressure, or perhaps you won a deal where you showed there was going to be greater efficiency and you replaced their IT organization or whatever you did, and now competition is coming in and they're offering what? Same value proposition, we can do it for less. And this is something difficult to combat. And so that's really what we want to address. In fact, I was doing a lunch and learn just about 3 weeks ago with a guy out in the West Coast, and this guy's business had grown over time, and then it started to shrink. And over the past couple of years, really, very few new accounts. And so I had met him through my online training program, the Security Mastery Sales Program, and so in one of our coaching calls, I suggested we do a marketing event. And he said, wow, I've never done a marketing event. Now I want to step back and remind you, or if you saw my event last night, I shared with the group that my first Lunch and Learn event only had 6 people sign up for it. Only 2 attended. It was miserable. But in this case, we were able to attract 34 new clients or new prospects. These were business owners, small business owners who are able to spend money. They're economic buyers. And so our job was to convert these people to something, to move them forward. And by the end of the event, in 1 hour, in 60 minutes of presenting the kind of material that I'm going to give you a summary of today, we were able to move them from not really knowing that they need anything to an urgency in wanting to sign up for an assessment. And so I want to show you here how we did that kind of in a summary form. So if you look at what's happening out there in the industry, this is key, right? What are small business owners thinking of? First of all, they're not thinking about your products, right? They're not getting up in the morning and going, I wonder if our server's up, or I wonder if we need more storage space, or I wonder whatever, right? They're thinking about their business. They're thinking about their clients. They're thinking about their payroll. They're thinking about possible debt they're trying to get out of or trying to stay out of. They're trying to figure out, how do we grow our business, or are we going to be put out of business by some other company before I can retire? These are the sorts of things that would be on someone's mind who is running a small business. So don't make the mistake of thinking that they are concerned about your product. They're not. But if we look at some of the trends out there, technology-wise, there's some things happening that need to be addressed. And so the question I have for you is, are you talking to your clients about the most important thing there is to talk about? And if you're wondering what that is, let me give you a little feel for it. Okay? Right now we are in what might be called the digitization megatrend. People are going digital. You're seeing this everywhere, and it's nothing really new. Over the last couple of years, we've seen this, right? Businesses going online, small businesses competing globally using internet, right? A lot of social media being used to drive marketing and that sort of thing. Mobility, cloud technology, Gartner Group says that 80% of small businesses will move to the cloud over the next 5 years, and I suspect it will be faster than that. And so as we look at those trends, we also need to realize some of the downsides that are taking place, right? We've got a whole generation of people coming out of universities today that are very digitally minded, so much so that they've kind of lost track of what security is. And so if you're wondering what that topic is that is so important, it is security. Security is the most important thing that you could be thinking of right now. As we move into the Internet of Things, we connect stuff, we become more and more mobile, we're doing more and more on our phones, on our tablets, and it's all digital, it's all connected, and it is all accessible, meaning that hackers or misuse is coming and is happening all around us, right? And so we've got to do something about that. If we look at kind of the nation around us, we see that all of our infrastructure is online. Our dams, our water treatment systems, our power plants, our power grids, the plans for our jet fighters and so forth. All this stuff is online. And of course, I'm listing things here that the Wall Street Journal over the past couple of years have reported incidents of those kinds of things being compromised, data being stolen, and problems resulting. But it's on the small scale too. If we look at cars, cars that have Bluetooth today, a pacemaker being hacked into, or somebody on a plane claiming to hack into that plane, right? These are things that affect our everyday lives. And actually, if you look under the covers, there's a lot going on from nation states overseas, China, Russia, North Korea, countries out there that have economic problems that are trying to boost their economy. And what do they want? They want our intellectual capital. This has been called the greatest transfer of wealth in history, and it's happening now, and it's happening largely in the small businesses, because small business is where innovation takes place. We are absolutely at war. The problem is, you go to a small business owner and you say, hey, you ought to boost your security, end-node security, firewall security, managed security, and they're going to look at you and they're going to say, we don't have any money, right? We're putting our money into marketing, we're putting our money into R&D, into sales, into whatever, but we're not buying more security because security has no return on investment. So unless it's really needed, they're not going to buy it. And when you come in there and you say, well, your patches are out of date and your systems are old, your server, this thing's 20 years old, you can just expect that business owner to say, it's been running for 20 years, we haven't had any problems, it's fine. And what are you going to say? He's right. Well, he's not exactly right. And so what I want to do is I want to show you what I presented in that last Lunch and Learn, because we have been having tremendous success in converting people from not thinking they need anything to moving right into a security assessment. And once we get them there, we have an opportunity to really show them. Now, all this information that I'm getting ready to share with you is expanded in tremendous detail in a couple of places. One is there's a book called The House in the Cloud. The House in the Cloud is a tremendous recap of how to go to business with security. It's not a technical book, it is a sales book. So I'd recommend you read it. I'd recommend you read it if you're trying to learn how to sell security, if you're trying to sell security into bigger accounts, if you're trying to take point product opportunities and turn them into enterprise opportunities, or if you're just starting out with security, or even just starting out in technology sales and you want to ramp up quickly. I'm going to give you the strategies and the talk tracks to use to really grow that. Now, if you want to take that a step further, I'm going to talk a lot about lunch and learns and that sort of thing in this talk. And I have a program for lunch and learns that takes you from A to Z, everything you need to know to set up a lunch and learn, including the letters you send out and everything. And then I also have a training program which covers everything in the security sales area, called the Security Sales Mastery Program, okay? And that's where it all comes together. So if you really want to understand how to go to market with security, you want to get these new prospects in there and you want to convert them to assessments and perform those assessments, and I don't mean at a technical level, but at a sales level, that program will take you through the whole thing. It's 3 months long, and it involves coaching. It's work at your own pace pretty much, so it doesn't take lots of time, but it's over a long period of time so that you have time to adopt the things and then bounce those ideas off of me so I can help you really apply it to your business. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the video. So if we were to summarize the whole process that I'm getting ready to talk about here, it's summarized in this thing I call the conversion blueprint. Okay? The conversion blueprint starts out with a message, goes to an education, goes from an education to an assessment, from an assessment to projects, and from projects to annuity services. Okay? We need a message to drive people into an educational meeting. That's what a lunch and learn is. So when I mentioned that lunch and learn I did a few weeks ago, we took a message, we sent that message out to small business owners, and we attracted, and we had a conversion rate, right? How many letters or how many emails or how many contacts did we go after in order to convert 34 people into that meeting? I did another one recently on the East Coast. We had 22 attendees. Again, we had to reach out to a list and convert those people to a meeting. Okay, so I want to show you a little bit about how we did that as we go through this. But then in that meeting, we had 60 minutes to convert those people to something else. And we chose the assessment. I explain in the House in the Cloud book exactly why we use the assessment, but I'm going to show you a little bit about that right here. And then I go into more detail in the training program on how the salesperson actually conducts a lot of that assessment and gets a little bit of help from maybe their pre-sales engineer or somebody technical in their office. And then we need a way to convert that. And so again, in those resources, we talk a lot about conversion from assessment to project and how does that drive through to an annuity service to a managed security solution. Okay, so just some metrics that I want to throw out there. Over the last 10 years, about 75% of my audiences have converted. Okay, now it doesn't have to be me. It can be you, it can be another speaker, but it's got to be someone who's speaking about the right stuff. And remember, in the Marketing Success Kit, I talk a lot about who can speak, what they can speak about, how long you need to speak, what your meeting format ought to look like, and how to do the conversion. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the point is if you have the right message and you have the right call to action to move into the assessment, you're going to get a good conversion rate. In fact, over the last 12 months, our conversion rates are more like 90%. I think I've only done one event that was less than 90% in the last 12 months, and that was 89%. So very, very high conversion rates. We're getting somewhere between 25 and 50 executives or small business owners or whatever market we're going after into these meetings. And the meeting tends to be about 2 hours long with a 1 hour session. So 30 minutes to kind of sign in, network, 60 minutes of talk, and then about 30 minutes of wind down, sign up, people drifting out, that sort of thing. So in just 2 hours, from let's say 11:30 in the morning, till 2 hours later, 1:30, and they're out. So very easy to do, very simple process. So the thing that I start these meetings out with, I go through a few sound bites. I want to give them a sense of what's happening out there in the security space. But the first real content that I show them in an educational meeting, and I recommend you use this, okay? So if you're going in to call on somebody and you can get into a security discussion at all, what do you bring up first? You bring up the impact likelihood graph. And I told a funny story, which I'm not going to go through in this summary video, but you can find it in other places on my material, where I explain what impact likelihood really is, okay? But in a nutshell, in summary, it's an XY axis that has impact on the x-axis, and here's where we list the critical data assets that this company has. So maybe it's their CRM, or maybe it's their ERP, or just whatever they have that's really critical to their business. Certain kinds of data is really what we're interested in, but what application does that data sit in? We're not talking about network, server, storage. We're talking about data and where that data is created and used. And then the likelihood part, which is the y-axis, is where we look at each one of those things and we figure out what's the likelihood that they're actually going to encounter some kind of problem of misuse or theft or corruption or something that's going to make that data either not usable or accessible by competition or somebody they don't want to see that. Now when I come in and I start to sell on impact alone, oh, this could happen, that could happen, did you see the news? They're not going to buy. Because in their mind, the likelihood is like if I tell you that we could get hit with a nuclear bomb right now. Well, you're not going to go run for cover because it's not likely, right? It could happen someday, but right now, right this moment, while you're watching this video, the likelihood is low in your mind and mine, and so I'm sitting here doing this, right? And the same is true of that small business owner. He's thinking about 100 other things that are more likely a problem than what you're talking about right now. And so we need a way to measure this impact likelihood for them, and that's what's going to create the justification. That's what will move people to action. Now, in the sessions over the last couple of months where I've been traveling around and doing these road shows, I go through the trends, and of course this is what I present in my Lunch and Learns. I give them about 7 major trends that are going on. I'm not going to go into any detail here, but I'm just going to kind of throw them out. First of all, it is important to understand what bot technology is. Okay, so if you're not familiar with bots, this is not going to be a lesson on that, but I would Google it, I'd read a little bit about it. You don't need to know how to build one, you don't need to know what they all do, you just need to know in theory what it is and how it gets there. This is an instance of malware, and the truth is, antivirus software is pretty much over. I mean, we still need it, but it's just keeping out the riffraff, right? The really serious attacks are not going to be stopped by antivirus. Malware is getting in, and chances are very high, like 90% high, that there is malware on at least one computer in the businesses that you go out and assess. So look for it. And I've put together material in other places that tells you how to look for it, so we're not going to do that here. You also want to be aware of the mobility trends out there. Everyone's using their own device, right? This is okay, except that everyone believes they are their own IT and nobody's thinking about security, and they're downloading all kinds of stuff, and they're using systems that are being used for all kinds of purposes, including surfing sites that may have infections on them, downloading pirated software. I mean, who knows what people do with their own systems, but as they work and they do business and they also do personal stuff, there's no telling what's on that system. And because we're in this mobile mindset and you own the phone or you own the tablet, you tend to do whatever you want to do with it. We talked a lot about social media and how people are now willing to put anything out on the internet. In fact, I told one story which I will share here of a financial firm in New York City where a woman came in and through Facebook and started to friend all the men in that organization. And over a period of about 6 months, over 70% of those men gave her sensitive information, very sensitive information, about the systems that they were working on. But this is even worse. 13% of them actually gave out the passwords to the financial investment systems they were working on. This is unbelievable. I don't know how she talked them into this or what they traded to get that information, but wow, how do you defend against that? Now, the reason we know that is because this was actually a white hat hacker hired by the CEO of that company to test the integrity of the office. And wow, how do you defend against that? By the way, it turns out that it was a 40-year-old man, not a 25-year-old woman, disguised on Facebook, so you never know who you're talking to out there. We talked about how passwords really don't work anymore. That was concern number 4. We talked about some of the internal threat, and here we're talking about actually employees willing to steal from their organizations. Wall Street Journal reports about 75 people do steal from their organizations. And then we have nation-state sponsored attacks, which I've already mentioned. And I talked a little bit about cyber warfare and some of the threats that are coming along with ISIS and other terrorist type activity that certainly could be leveraging cybercrime. And this, of course, creates a huge problem. And then I wanted to mention a word on compliance. Keep this in mind, that compliance is not security. And a lot of small business owners have been taught that if they're compliant, they're good. So they're checking the boxes off, they got them checked off, they're good. The truth is, compliance is growing, it's getting worse. When I say it's getting worse, it's becoming more expensive, but it's not necessarily addressing the security issues that those businesses actually have. So you need to separate them. Sure, you need to be compliant to avoid fines, but if you don't want more compliance poured on you, which is going to be very expensive and eventually put small businesses out of business, you need to be securing your data so that we're not constantly in the news for losing more data. The bottom line is, they're not seeing problems because the FBI tells us it takes about 14 months to see problems. Okay? So then I went into the root problem. So this is the other talk track. If you can understand how to present the impact likelihood graph, and then you could understand how to do the house in the cloud presentation. These two things work hand in hand. So you go into a company or you're in a lunch and learn and you show them the impact likelihood graph. This is what you need to know. You can't make decisions without an impact likelihood graph. It's just impossible to figure out what your budget should be and how soon to do it and all that sort of thing. But if there are urgent, high likelihood things to do, they should be done now. The other piece of that is the one big problem that most companies are making. And I guarantee that over 90% of your clients or prospects are making this problem. They're making this mistake. And this mistake is leading to a loss of data every day. It's happening in big companies and it's happening in little companies. And it's really prevalent in the mid-market and the small market because they don't know about it. So learn to deliver the house in the cloud message. I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of how it works. First of all, this is not a technical problem, But what we want to do is we want to drop back and we want to look at how security works. Like forget about firewalls and antivirus. Let's just think in theory, how does security work? And so I went through this house in the cloud model. The house in the cloud model says we have a house, and a house is fairly safe. If you live in a house, you probably feel pretty safe. It probably depends on what neighborhood you live in and what part of the country and all that sort of thing. But in general, we've put things into our home and into physical security, into banks and office buildings and things like that, hotels, that make them fairly safe, physically safe. Now, what are those things? If we were to start to list those things, they are the doors, the windows, the lock, maybe a fence, alarms, motion detection. You could have video surveillance or monitoring from a third-party company like an ADT, Crime Watch, or Neighborhood Watch. You might have dogs, or you might have firearms, or you might have, you're going to call 911. It's on your speed dial. You've got an insurance policy in case things really go bad, right? Well, if you were to list out all these things, you'd have 12 things. And you might be able to add one or two to this list. But this is a good list, 12 solid things. The problem is that these things in themselves do not protect your home or your bank or your business. It's actually a system that's in place that uses these components. It organizes these components. And when the system works, it works in order and it's timed. Protection, detection, response. Protection keeps things out. Detection detects when something comes in, and a response plan goes into motion to stop things before it's too late. Now, in the lunch and learns that I do, I always ask for a show of hands, and I did this as I traveled around over the last couple of months here with the reseller events that I was doing. Which one of these columns is most important or must be built with the greatest care? Now, you need all three. I've had some people argue with me about which one's really more important. You have to have all three. If you're missing one of them, it doesn't work. Okay? You've got to have protection, detection, response. But I wonder if you could just take a moment and tell me which one of these is most important. Now, we took a poll. We had a few people on response, a little more, it's about the same amount on detection and most on protection. Just about every place that I did it. When I do it with a lunch and learn, I do with small business owners, that it's predominantly protection. However, this is not the right answer. It is detection. You don't have a lot of protection, physical protection in your home. Your doors and your windows are easy to break through. It is simple to break into a house. But if there's no detection, for some people it's their ears, if they live out in the country perhaps and they're just not worried about too much happening out there. Or in a city you might have more of an alarm and maybe even video surveillance. But your ability to detect before something happens is critical. And if it's too sensitive, it's going off all the time, you're going to ignore it. Kind of like those car alarms you hear in the parking lot. And if it doesn't go off enough, you don't know if it's going off or not. You don't know what's happening. And so you don't know how to respond. And an accurate detection program sets up a response plan, which is the second most important thing in this list. So once I know what's being detected, early detection has a slightly different response than late detection does, where some damage has been done. So we're looking for immediate early detection and a quick response plan. So if you've never thought about your own home, you might just think for a moment right now, okay, if someone were to break into our house, let's say 2 or 3 men broke your door down, your alarm went off, you're in the middle of the night, you wake up, what happens at your house? Okay? Do you have dogs? Do you have some kind of personal weapons? Are you going to, call the police and be able to wait 20 or 30 minutes for them to show up? You need to know, what is my response plan? When we start looking at the security side of things and data, what we find is most companies have built their programs on 3 things: firewalls, passwords, and encryption. Okay? Firewalls, passwords, and encryption all fall into column 1. It's not the right column to put all your money into, but Gartner Group tells us that 80% of the budget is being spent in column 1. And in the small business, it's more like 90%. So there is very little detection and almost no response built into the security strategy for these smaller companies. And this is a total mistake. This is the big mistake. And so when I get done talking about this and I show them what a security model should look like, protection, detection, response, across administrative or people functions, technology, and physical, we get this 9-box matrix, which is a pretty cool model for you to take in there and say, this is what you ought to be building. right? Here's the roadmap. You're not going to do it all today, but where should we start? We start with detection. Let's start putting in the tools that tell us if you have people in here already, that's an assessment, and then let's detect if anybody tries to get in here, and then let's formulate our response plan so that in the future, when stuff does start to happen, we can stop it in time before it's too late. Okay? And so this sets us up. Now, how did we convert 100% of our audience? And how did we get 34 people to the meeting? That's what I want to talk about now. First of all, we needed a message to get people into that education box. The message can't be 100 phone calls and I got 3 meetings. Okay, if you think about it, we took a list and we set up 22 meetings in about 4 weeks. We set up 34 meetings in a couple of weeks. We set up, 50 meetings. However many people showed up at a lunch and learn, think of that as a meeting. Could the same be true for one-on-one meetings? It could be. Here's the difference. In a typical sales prospecting model, people are using a list and they're making tons of phone calls to introduce themselves. Want to come by, show you my corporate presentation. And I got to tell you, they're not interested. In fact, I did an interview with a IT director a few weeks ago. And he's managing their security program. And I asked him in the interview, why don't you return resellers' phone calls? He said, simple, I get like 40 or 50 of those every week. And they just want to show me their corporate presentation. I don't have time for that. And that's true. On the other hand, I asked him, would he go to a lunch and learn that was focused on security trends, not products, was strategic in nature, and showed him some of the things like the biggest mistakes that companies are making right now and what the key trends are to be looking for in the next 12 months. He said, absolutely. We need that information. And that's what we went out to market with in that message. We sent out letters, we sent out emails, we made phone calls, those 3 things. And we got a high conversion rate, about 10%. 300 people on a list, 30 people to a meeting. 10% conversion, pretty cool. And then into the education box, the meeting, the lunch and learn. It could be a one-on-one meeting, it could be a luncheon, but it's a time to do an educational thing. Impact likelihood graph, house in the cloud, wow, don't you need to take a look? Assessment, convert them right there. And sure enough, we passed the sheet around right there in the audience and got people to sign up right on the spot. We're going to come in and we're going to build an impact likelihood graph for you. And you know what? It's a one-page deliverable. We're not talking about hours and hours and hours of work and writing and 50-page documents, tons of scanning. We're talking about an impact likelihood graph on 1 page. And a lot of it's a whiteboard presentation. So again, I go through a lot of this in the training program. But in a nutshell, that's really what it is. And when they see their data on that chart and they see these likelihoods and they have some justification, few bullet points, here's why this is so highly likely, here's what we found, here's the urgent issue, these 3 things must be addressed now. Then we have justification, then we have action, and this moves people forward. It moves them into projects, and here's the great thing, it moves them into managed services. And here's why. The impact likelihood graph, when you get in there, they're going to have data, high impact issues, and we're going to measure the likelihood, and you're going to find some that are urgent. You're going to find malware out there if you look for it. And that's a 100% issue, right? We're going to clean things up and we're going to bring that likelihood down to an acceptable level. Let's say down to 10% likely or 5% likely, okay? Something acceptable that's affordable. Now, it's going to be back tomorrow, isn't it? Unless we hook them up to some kind of detection program that's long-term. 7 by 24 every day of the year, maintaining an acceptable level of risk. Again, you pull out your impact likelihood graph and you say, we need to maintain an acceptable level of risk. And we do that by hooking up your systems into our systems so that we can monitor who's trying to get in and we can create a response plan to keep them out before it's too late. And this creates a conversion all the way from an initial prospect message into an education box, into an assessment, impact likelihood, fixing some things, remediation project, into managed services to maintain an acceptable level of risk. It's a very simple, predictable model, and as you work it, what you'll discover is there are certain points of conversion that are not working well for me right now. And so we can focus in on those, and we do those in the coaching aspects of the training program to make sure that you refine those conversion points so you can get a system that's running and it's repeatable and it eliminates hundreds of cold calls over the rest of the year. You'll find yourself actually talking with clients in more often now, and becoming that trusted advisor and showing them how to secure their environment. And you'll be an advisor to them in doing this. So there it is. I hope that you'll take advantage of these things. Get the book, check out the training, and if you're going to do lunch and learns, you definitely want to check out the Marketing Success Kit as well. So thank you very much, and let's go out and sell this stuff.